The V-Rod might be the most controversial Harley ever made, with roots leading back to AMA superbike programs and its legacy still living in the adventure bike market. It doesn't sound like a traditional Harley, and when it first came out, a lot of people absolutely hated it. But over 20 years later, some call it the greatest Harley ever made, while others still refuse to call it one at all. So I've got to ask, why did they build a motorcycle that was so different? Why did it divide the community for over a decade? And why did one of the boldest experiments ultimately come to an end? Well, today we're going to find out everything you need to know. So ladies and gentlemen, this is the controversial rise and fall of the Harley-Davidson V-Rod. The story of the V-Rod actually starts back in the 1980s. Harley was in quite the delicate position with the company's future on the line. They had to come up with something to carry them into the new era. A little known project dubbed the Supernova was in the works, being developed by both Harley and Porsche. The new engine would break the traditional 45 V-twin while laying down some unrelenting power. It was a liquid-cooled V4, so I mean, you're already seeing some strange stuff. In tandem with that, Harley was developing the Evolution engine. They ultimately had to scrap the Nova project as that Evo would give them the best chance of survival. While the Nova itself died, the hunger for a performance machine was never truly satisfied. Fast forward roughly a decade and Harley was once again trying to break into the world of speed. Porsche once again got involved, helping transform that concept into a 1000cc V-twin. Dropping this engine into the VR1000 Superbike, Harley took aim for the AMA Nationals. They would be disappointed though, the VR never won a championship, much less the hearts of the consumer. Before long the project was tossed in the can, and Harley had to move on. Taking everything they had learned from the VR1000, Harley wrapped that motor in a chassis unlike anything they had ever produced. It didn't really look like a Harley. It looked lower, longer, and almost as if it had been put on steroids. The new engine featured a larger displacement, so it helped boost the performance numbers to something a Harley has never even seen up until this point. Put this image in your head. It's mid-December of 2001. The barn shield is ready to step out of its comfort zone in a way it had never done before. Introducing the Harley-Davidson V-Rod, America's first muscle cruiser. Up to this point, the closest thing to a competitor was probably the Honda Magna, and honestly, even that's a stretch. Harley would finally give this new engine a name, so they called it the Revolution. It produced 115 horses and screamed all the way up to a 9,000 RPM redline. With a blistering top speed of 140 miles an hour, it could shred the quarter mile in under 12 seconds. That's faster than a Ninja 600 while still maintaining the comfort of a Harley. But with great power comes great brakes, unless you plan on a brick wall being your destination. A Brembo triple disc setup was thrown on here to prevent that. They took a gamble with the new machine and were a little scared, especially with the $17,000 price tag. To be fair, I would too. And to everyone's surprise, it actually sold out completely in its first year of production. The V-Rod wasn't built for the average Harley guy though. Instead, it tried to attract sport bike riders and the youngsters who had never seriously considered buying a Harley before. The V-Rod was fast, modern. Honestly, it was something refreshing. But while the sales numbers looked great, a storm was already brewing within the community. The V-Rod was selling, and Harley was jumping for joy at the leap that they just took with this. New riders were walking into dealerships and riding out in style. Everything seemed to be going great, but there was just one problem. Harley's core audience absolutely hated it. Obviously, it's not what you see when you think of Harley, but it is a drag bike at the end of the day. The bigger issue was the sound. Instead of the iconic potato, 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 you got a big whop sound. Part of Harley's image is the potato, but the V-Rod sounded like it was ready to throw hands. Harley definitely heard the complaints people had about the V-Rod, and what was their response? Double down and make the lineup wider than that rear tire. In 2004, Harley introduced the VRS CB, featuring a black frame and mid-controls. 2 years later came the Street Rod. With sharper handling, upgraded suspension, and more ground clearance, it transformed it into something that could actually attack the corners. Even today, many riders consider it to be the best handling V-Rod in the lineup. Now for the most recognizable on the platform, introducing the Night Rod, featuring a blacked out appearance and a very aggressive attitude. And if you thought Harley was going to back away from performance, you'd be mistaken. They introduced one of the craziest motorcycles that they had ever built. the V-Rod Destroyer. It was a factory-built drag bike packing over 160 horses. Not to mention it was capable of running the quarter mile in the 9s. It wasn't street legal, it wasn't practical, and it certainly wasn't subtle. But it proved one thing. Harley-Davidson was no longer experimenting with the Revolution engine, they were fully committing to it. Speaking of commitment, here are the limited production Screamin' Eagle models throughout the V-Rod's life. In 2005, Harley had the first, I'm just gonna call it CVO V-Rod, and they also had a Screamin' Eagle tribute bike in 2007. So 3 years in a row, 3 different CVOs. Basically, they just had premium parts, exclusive painted frames, and a lot of other big dollar features. In 2007, they introduced the VRS-CAW. That's a mouthful. It had a slightly more custom look as well as a little bit fatter of a rear tire. Shortly after came the Night Rod Special, taking everything people loved about the original and cranking it up to 11. I've even seen some people turn these into like the Bat bike, so those are cool. But in 2008, the Revolution engine did get a little bump in displacement, jumping from 1130cc to about 1250. The V-Rod had a pretty hefty lineup, but the last notable model that would come is the Muscle. It was really digging into a new look. It was wider, had larger intake scoops, and a cool little style of exhaust. At this point, I think Harley knew exactly what they wanted the V-Rod to be, so they kind of stopped experimenting. For its 10th birthday in 2012, it got a paint scheme that paid homage to the original bike, along with that wild side exit exhaust. Not too bad for a bike that a lot of people thought would never survive. Though the V-Rod seemed like it was on top of the world, all good things come to an end. The machine built a gnarly fan base over the years, but not enough to make it a mainstream Harley. In the latter half of the 2010s, emission laws were getting stricter, especially overseas in Europe, and Harley would have had to do some major updates on the engine to be compliant, which would cost a decent chunk of change. Not to mention, the company was headed down a different road, and they saw the V-Rod was too expensive to keep producing, and the sales at the time were just not justifying it. After 15 years on the market, Harley had reached a crossroads, as it would join both the original Softail frame as well as the Dyna to the grave. I never really was a fan of the V-Rod, but after researching its history and writing the script, I started to understand what the bike was trying to be. Given the opportunity, I'd hop on the saddle tomorrow just to see what all the fuss is about. I do also want to say thank you all for 10,000 subscribers. It's honestly incredible how far we made it on here. I am going to do a Q&A here soon, so drop any questions down in the comments and I'll be on the lookout. Let me know what you think about the V-Rod. Was it ahead of its time, or should Harley have never built the thing in the first place? Anyways, that's all we have time for today. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel, and if you learned something new, leave a like. I appreciate you all, so ride safe out there. But if you can't do that, ride hard.